More than 2.8 million people have fled Ukraine so far, with fears that that number could rise as high as 10 million. So let's bring in Kerri Murray, president of the global humanitarian organization ShelterBox USA, for more on this. Kerri, thanks for being here. I know you just returned from Krakow, Poland, which is one of the main hubs for these refugees. So what was it like there?
Well, I was actually in Krakow, but I was working down on the border at the main train station, where 20,000 people are arriving each and every day. And what I witnessed really is a lot of very vulnerable people, a lot of elderly, disabled, children, and moms. And then I also saw a lot of pets. But you're right, not many men. If you're between the ages of 18 and 60, you have to stay back to fight. So families are making these really difficult decisions of having to leave parts of their family behind. I saw that often. If they're 18 and over, they're staying. And so people coming with the young children, but they're making really hard choices. And the hard thing is they're arriving with little more than coats on their backs, maybe a small bag, very few things. And many of them have no idea where they're going to be staying. And so shelter is a really massive need.
So what stood out most to you from your conversations with these refugees and with their families?
What stood out for me is that these families really have left behind everything, their homes, their livelihoods, oftentimes their husbands, their children. And really, they're not necessarily that relieved to get over the border. They're so worried and they're overwhelmed, they're exhausted. Many of them have traveled for many days just to get to that point on the border, and they're in absolute fear. And now we have 2.8 million refugees. Yes, the UN is saying that can get between 8 to 10 million. And for these folks, it's the immediate needs. It's how do I feed my family? Where are we going to sleep? So at ShelterBox, we are a humanitarian organization. We focus on the provision of emergency shelter and then basic supplies. So blankets, mattresses, everything like cook sets, solar lanterns. And so we're going to be working to help these basic needs for the refugees that are fleeing, along with a lot of other humanitarian organizations. But we're also deeply concerned about the needs of people in Ukraine. You can't forget, you've got millions of people fleeing from east and northern Ukraine to West Ukraine, yes, to Lviv. And the concern now is how do we keep these humanitarian corridors open? How do we get aid in to the most vulnerable people who've been left behind in Ukraine?
And that's the question I think so many are trying to answer right now, right? And Ukraine did announce the opening of new humanitarian corridors for people to escape. What do we know about those people and their safety right now?
Well, we know that it's a very long process. It could be many days to get out of the country, and we've got to keep the corridors open. That's what we're advocating for. We have to be able to get humanitarian aid to these folks too. But it's deeply concerning when you see things like the military bombing yesterday at that military base in Lviv, and you've had dozens of people killed, many injured. And if the fighting is moving to West Ukraine, this can become incredibly complex for humanitarian organizations that are using those corridors and also places like Lviv for staging facilities for the humanitarian aid that needs to reach people internally displaced within Ukraine. And the number's massive. So while you have 2.8 million people who fled and millions internally displaced, right now the UN is estimating it's 12 million people need humanitarian assistance.
And we keep seeing these images of people all bundled up, hearing about the freezing temperatures. How much is the weather factoring into the challenges of this refugee crisis?
Yes, so it's very challenging. It's extraordinarily cold. And that's one of the reasons why ShelterBox, in addition to things like blankets and shelter kits and solar lights, we're also looking at the provision of basic needs and like thousands of just coats, winter coats, because it is so cold. It's freezing. And so we have to make sure we can settle these people securely into temporary shelters. That's crucial. And also that we make sure their basic needs are met. Food, water, shelter, access to medical care. That's what these folks need right now.
And Kerri, we try so hard to tell these stories as best as we can, but having been there on the ground and seen it with your own eyes, what do you feel that people watching just maybe don't get?
just how vulnerable these families are, and their families just like our own. And just thinking about, as a mom, having to leave I have an 18-year-old, leaving a child behind to have to fight, and having to make these critical life and death decisions to maybe save your parents and save your children, but knowing that you may never see your children again, or in your home will be gone, and when can you get back to loved ones? It's awful. And so these stories are harrowing. And also just the vulnerable people that are making it out, like the elderly people and disabled folks, they need help. And so as a humanitarian organization, we have to rally everything we can to help these families, these refugees, but also we cannot forget about the people who are internally displaced in Ukraine. And they just need our help, and it's the basic needs these folks need. But what I have also seen is that sometimes in the worst of times, you see the best of humanity. So I also saw people driving dozens of hours across the EU to come to the train station to pick people up that they've never met before, but they want to serve as a host family. And so people doing everything they can, and the Polish people, for sure, they're first responders. They're doing an incredible, incredible job at trying to meet some of the basic needs.
All right, Kerri Murray with ShelterBox USA. We appreciate your time and your work, Kerri. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.